Priya Sharma thought she was stepping into a fairy tale when she married Rohit Singh. But by the end of their wedding night in Canada, she was lying lifeless on the floor of her new home, beaten to death by the very family that had welcomed her with smiles. Priya Sharma had grown up in the quiet outskirts of Jaipur, where dreams often ended at the city's borders. She worked as a primary school teacher, living a simple life filled with routine and modest hopes. Her parents, Meena and Arvind Sharma, adored her deeply and wanted to see her married into a good family. When a proposal came from Canada, it felt like fate had finally smiled on them. The groom, Rohit Singh, was the son of a respected businessman settled in Toronto. He was handsome, well-educated, and successful. Everyone said Priya was lucky. Her parents couldn't stop talking about the wedding, and neighbors whispered enviously about her fortune. From the moment Rohit's family arrived in India, they carried an air of superiority. Kamini Singh, the groom's mother, barely interacted with the Sharmas except to make demands about decorations and gold jewelry. Still, Priya's parents accepted everything quietly, eager to please their soon-to-be in-laws. They believed that such behavior was part of the wealthy lifestyle. Priya, shy but obedient, convinced herself that things would improve once she got to know them better. Rohit seemed kind enough during their brief meetings. He spoke politely, praised her English, and promised a happy life in Canada. Priya tried to ignore the small cracks she noticed: the impatient glances, the controlling tone of his mother, the disinterest of his father. Her mind was too full of excitement and nervousness to think deeply about anything else. For her, this marriage meant a chance to travel, to grow, to live a new life. On the evening before the wedding, as she looked at her red bridal dress shimmering in the golden light, she whispered to herself that everything would be perfect. She had no idea her dreams were walking her straight into a nightmare. The wedding day arrived with dazzling sunlight and the sound of music echoing through the palace courtyard in Udaipur. Priya's family had spared no expense, decorating the venue with marigold garlands, floating candles, and shimmering fabrics. Guests gathered in colorful attire, taking photos and showering compliments on the beautiful bride. Priya, dressed in a red and gold lehenga, looked radiant yet nervous, her heart pounding beneath layers of silk. As she walked toward the mandip, she caught sight of Rohit standing confidently beside his parents. He smiled for the cameras, but his eyes held something distant, almost calculating. She told herself it was only the pressure of the moment. The rituals went on for hours, and everyone cheered as the couple exchanged garlands. From the outside, it looked like a perfect union, an Indian bride marrying into a wealthy Canadian family. But behind the glittering smiles, Priya sensed tension. Kamini Singh maintained a stiff composure throughout the ceremony, often whispering to her husband, Rajinder, who barely clapped when the vows were completed. Whenever Priya's relatives approached to greet them, their polite smiles quickly faded once backs were turned. It was subtle, but enough to unsettle her. That night, the reception sparkled with luxury. A live band played, photographers circled, and the newlyweds danced under fairy lights. Yet Priya felt strangely detached, as though she was watching herself from afar. When she reached the bridal suite later, exhaustion took over, but her mind wouldn't rest. She thought of her parents' proud faces and prayed that the Singh family would soon accept her. She wanted love, belonging, and peace. As the fireworks burst outside, lighting up the lake, she tried to believe that this marriage was the beginning of something beautiful, unaware that darkness had already crept into her life. Months before her wedding, Priya had visited a local clinic for a routine medical checkup required for her visa paperwork. She expected it to be a simple formality, but when the doctor called her back into the room with a serious expression, her heart sank. The test results showed she was HIV positive. For a few seconds, the world around her blurred. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The doctor explained that the infection was likely from a blood transfusion she had received years earlier after a minor accident. It wasn't her fault, yet shame clung to her like a shadow. For days, Priya stayed locked in her room, crying silently into her pillow. She feared what people would say, how her parents would react, how her future would vanish before it even began. When she finally gathered the courage to tell her doctor she was engaged, he advised her to start treatment immediately. The medicines would control the infection and allow her to live a normal life. He assured her it was manageable, but to the world around her, it would be an unforgivable mark. The thought of losing Rohit and bringing disgrace to her family terrified her. Priya decided to keep the truth to herself. She convinced herself that she was not a danger to anyone as long as she followed her treatment. Her faith in love blinded her to the risks of secrecy. Each morning, she carefully hid her pills behind her cosmetics, promising herself she'd reveal the truth one day when the time felt right. But deep down, she knew she never would. The fear of judgment was stronger than honesty. She carried her secret like a hidden wound, unaware that one small bottle of pills would later seal her fate forever. When Priya stepped out of Toronto Pearson Airport, the icy wind hit her face like a shock. It was her first time outside India, and the vast, cold landscape felt both thrilling and intimidating. Rohit's family stood waiting by a black SUV, dressed in heavy coats, their smiles practiced and brief. Kamini gave her a polite nod but avoided eye contact, while Rajinder checked his watch impatiently. Rohit seemed distracted, speaking on his phone instead of helping with her luggage. Priya told herself they were simply tired from the long drive, but the silence during the journey to their home spoke volumes. The Singh residence was enormous, a mansion in a quiet Toronto suburb surrounded by tall fences and trimmed lawns. Inside, everything was spotless, modern, and cold. Kamini showed her around with mechanical courtesy, warning her not to touch certain items and to stay in the guest room until the proper room was ready. Priya tried to smile and obey, eager to fit in, but every corner of the house reminded her that she didn't belong there yet. She missed her parents terribly, especially the warmth of her mother's voice. The following days were filled with uneasy routines. Kamini often criticized her cooking, Rajinder ignored her attempts at conversation, and Rohit spent most of his time at work. When they did sit together for dinner, the family spoke in English so fast that Priya struggled to follow. She felt invisible, like a stranger living in someone else's house. At night, she unpacked her belongings quietly, placing her medical kit deep inside her bag. As she stared out the window at the unfamiliar snow-covered street, she told herself to be patient. She believed love and time would soften their hearts, not knowing that suspicion was already growing around her. It was late evening when Priya decided to unpack the last of her luggage. The snow outside had stopped, and the house was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. She wanted to organize her things before starting her new life properly. Among her belongings was a small pouch containing her antiretroviral medication. She carefully placed the bottles in the drawer of her bedside table, unaware that someone was watching. Kamini had passed by the room on her way to the laundry when she noticed the label on one of the bottles through the half-open door. Her eyes narrowed as she read the unfamiliar name of the medicine and searched it online on her phone. Within seconds, the truth appeared on the screen: HIV treatment. Kamini's hands began to shake. She felt sick, betrayed, and furious. In her mind, Priya had tricked her son into marriage, bringing shame and danger into their family. Without thinking, she stormed into Rajinder's study and showed him the search results. His face turned pale, then dark with rage. Rohit, who had just returned from work, walked in to find his parents shouting. Kamini accused Priya of hiding a deadly disease, while Rajinder ranted about humiliation and deceit. Rohit tried to defend his wife at first, saying there must be a mistake, but Kamini's fury only grew stronger. They demanded he confront Priya immediately. Instead, he sat in silence, torn between his love and the fear of his parents' wrath. The atmosphere in the house changed instantly. What had been cold now felt suffocating. By the time Priya came downstairs, the whispers had already begun. Her secret, the one she had buried so deeply, was now out in the open, and her new family's anger was about to explode. The Singh household descended into chaos after the discovery. Kamini's fury was relentless, her voice echoing through the halls as she accused Priya of betrayal and sin. Rajinder paced the living room like a man possessed, muttering about dishonor and how the community would react once they found out. Their anger wasn't driven by concern for Rohit's health, but by fear of losing face. For them, reputation meant everything, and now they believed it was ruined by the girl they had welcomed only days ago. Rohit sat quietly in the corner, unable to meet anyone's eyes. He felt cornered, his thoughts tangled between disbelief and guilt. Kamini demanded that Priya be sent back to India immediately. Rajinder argued that it wasn't enough. that people would question why their new daughter-in-law had vanished. They needed to silence the scandal before it ever reached anyone outside the family. Every word they spoke was soaked in panic. What began as shock quickly turned into something darker. The more they talked, the more their anger fed on itself. Rohit tried to suggest talking to Priya to understand what really happened, but his mother's words cut him off. She insisted that Priya had intentionally deceived them and endangered their entire family. Rajinder slammed his fist on the table, shouting that she had no right to live under their roof. The room filled with rage and fear until logic disappeared completely. By midnight, a chilling silence settled in. No one spoke of love, forgiveness, or understanding anymore. The family that once celebrated a grand wedding now shared only hatred and disgust. Upstairs, Priya lay awake, unaware that her fate was already being decided in the very house she thought would be her home. The night had turned cold and eerily quiet inside the Singh mansion. Priya was in her room, trying to make sense of the sudden hostility she had felt all evening. The faint sound of arguing downstairs sent waves of unease through her chest. She wanted to believe it was about something trivial, but her instincts told her otherwise. When she finally gathered the courage to step out and check, the living room was dimly lit, and three faces turned toward her with an expression she had never seen before: pure hatred. Rohit's eyes were hollow, Kamini's filled with rage, and Rajinder's cold as stone. Before Priya could speak, Kamini struck her hard across the face. The impact threw her off balance. Her ears rang as accusations filled the air, but she couldn't find her voice to defend herself. Every attempt to explain was drowned out by shouting. Kamini called her a liar, Rajinder hurled insults, and Rohit stood frozen, his silence louder than their screams. Then the violence escalated. A vase shattered, a chair toppled, and Priya's cries echoed through the hall. Each blow came with words of disgust and blame. She stumbled, bleeding, her bangles breaking against the marble floor. Her pleas went unheard. She begged them to stop, to listen, to understand that she had never meant to harm anyone. But the anger consuming them had turned them into strangers, unrecognizable and merciless. When the final strike landed, everything went still. Priya collapsed, her body lifeless against the cold floor, the bridal henna still faintly visible on her hands. Kamini fell into a chair, trembling. Rajinder stared blankly, and Rohit sank to his knees. The house that had once echoed with wedding music was now filled with silence and the scent of blood. For several minutes after the attack, no one moved. The silence inside the mansion was suffocating, broken only by the faint ticking of a wall clock. Priya's body lay motionless on the polished floor, her wedding bangles scattered like broken glass around her. Kamini sat trembling, staring at her own hands as if realizing too late what she had done. Rajinder was the first to act. His panic quickly turned to calculation. He ordered everyone to stay calm, insisting they had to fix this before anyone found out. Rohit, pale and shaking, knelt beside his wife, whispering her name, but there was no response. The reality of what had just happened began to crush him. Rajinder dragged Rohit away, warning him that calling the police would destroy the entire family. Kamini followed, crying hysterically, muttering prayers under her breath. They decided to hide the body temporarily until they could come up with a believable story. Rohit, numb and terrified, carried Priya's lifeless body down to the basement, placing her gently under a sheet. The weight of guilt pressed down on him with every step. Upstairs, Kamini scrubbed the bloodstains off the floor, her tears mixing with the cleaning water. Rajinder burned the bloodied cloth in the fireplace, erasing every trace he could find. They agreed on a lie. If anyone asked, they would say Priya had fallen ill suddenly and was resting in bed. Rajinder rehearsed the story, while Kamini deleted messages and photos from Priya's phone. But they couldn't erase everything. Outside, a neighbor's lights flickered on. Someone had heard the commotion and seen shadows moving through the windows. The Singh family didn't know it yet, but their perfect cover-up had already begun to crumble. The following morning, the Singh mansion looked unusually quiet. Curtains were drawn, and no one stepped outside. Kamini pretended to prepare breakfast, though her hands trembled so badly that she dropped a cup. Rajinder sat at the dining table, expressionless, his mind focused on maintaining their story. Rohit hadn't slept all night. Every time he closed his eyes, He saw Priya's lifeless face and the blood that refused to fade from his memory. He wanted to run, to tell someone, but his father's warning echoed in his ears. The lie felt heavier than his guilt, but fear kept him silent. Around mid-morning, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. O'Connor, their elderly neighbor. She smiled politely, but her eyes were sharp. She mentioned hearing loud noises the night before and asked if everything was all right. Kamini forced a smile, claiming Priya wasn't feeling well and needed rest. The explanation didn't convince her. Mrs. O'Connor had lived next door for 20 years. She knew what a fight sounded like. As she left, she glanced toward the basement window and noticed the curtains had been hastily pinned shut. An hour later, police cars appeared on the street. Mrs. O'Connor had called in a welfare check, uneasy about what she had heard. Rajinder tried to appear calm as two officers entered the house. They asked routine questions. Where was the new bride? When was she last seen? Could they speak to her? Kamini insisted Priya was sleeping, but her trembling voice betrayed her. When the officers requested to check the house, Rohit's heart nearly stopped. As they walked through each room, one of the officers noticed a faint red stain on the stairs. Within minutes, the cheerful home turned into a sealed crime scene, and the family's facade began to collapse. At the police station, the interrogation room felt colder than the Canadian winter outside. Rohit sat at the metal table, his hands trembling as officers questioned him about the night of Priya's death. At first, he repeated the lie his father had crafted, that Priya had collapsed suddenly and they had panicked. But as the hours dragged on, his voice began to falter. The officers already had evidence, traces of blood in the living room, bruises on Priya's body, and inconsistencies in the family statements. Under the weight of guilt and fear, Rohit finally broke down. His confession spilled out in fragments, his parents' anger, the shouting, the violence, and the desperate attempt to hide what they had done. Once Rohit confessed, the police moved quickly. Kamini and Rajinder were arrested that evening. Kamini wept uncontrollably, pleading that it was an accident, while Rajinder maintained a cold silence. Forensic investigators recovered the sheet-wrapped body from the basement, confirming the brutality of the attack. News of the crime spread rapidly across Toronto, shocking both the local community and Indian media. Reporters gathered outside the police station, filming every moment as the once-respected Singh family was led away in handcuffs. During the court proceedings, the details were laid bare for the world to see. Medical reports showed Priya had been on treatment, her condition stable and non-contagious. Experts testified that there had been no danger to anyone. The jury listened in silence as the prosecutor described how ignorance, fear, and pride had fueled a senseless killing. Rohit's testimony turned the tide completely. His tearful confession revealed the truth behind the closed doors of the Singh mansion, a truth that destroyed not just one life, but an entire family consumed by shame and hate.